I used to dread math tests. The night before, I'd cram, flipping through past papers and trying to absorb as much as I could. But no matter how much I studied, I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't feel ready. I didn't feel prepared. My mind would race as I lay in bed, seeing formulas flash before my eyes, but then anxiety would take over and keep me awake. I would end up just staring at the ceiling and not getting a wink of sleep at all, which was already a mistake. I'd rush through my notes the next morning, hands shaking, convinced I'd never be able to remember everything when the test started. I even remember having shaky hands as I answered my paper. That was me in 2022. It's frustrating when you've done all that you could to prepare, but still get overwhelmed by the pressure. But after a lot of trial and error, I managed to find out the ways to help me study smarter and manage my stress. So today, I want to share you the methods that really help me turn things around. First up, the Feynman method. It's simple. You learn by teaching. Let me break it down for you. You explain what you just learned as if you're teaching it to someone else. If you don't have a study buddy, pretend you're teaching to an imaginary audience. It might feel awkward at first, but you'll eventually get used to it. As you explain, you uncover the parts that you struggle with, and those are the parts where you need to revisit. The best part of this method is that it actively highlights the gaps in your understanding, helping you fix them before the test. When I was in primary school, I used to go up to my mom and ask her about math questions that I couldn't solve. My mom always taught me by simplifying concepts and explaining them step by step. She even drew out some of the questions for me so that I could understand better. I once had a teacher tell me that when you answer your math exam, write it like the person marking it doesn't know anything about math. And that's exactly how my mom taught me. I used to have friends in primary school that would come up to me and ask me how to do math questions. The funny thing was that every time I explained it to them, although it made sense to me, my friends would often go, "Huh? I don't get it though." I would then try to explain it again and again, and I believe at one point I even got frustrated because I couldn't get them to understand. I remember complaining about this to my dad, and he told me, if you can't explain it to someone until they understand, then you don't truly understand the concept. If you can explain it in simple terms, then you know you've truly mastered the concept. By the time I reached high school, I had gotten better at explaining math concepts. And while I thought I was helping my friends, I quickly realized that teaching others solidified my understanding. My friends would often ask me questions like, "Why did you do it that way?" And I'd have to double check my reasoning. Through these questions, I learned even more. Tip number 2, don't skip past your papers. I used to focus on studying maths chapter by chapter, thinking that would help. But that approach was inefficient because I wasn't doing exam-style questions. One day, I asked one of my friends, someone who was really good at math, how she always aced her exams. Besides telling me to get enough sleep, she also said, do more past year papers. I realized that by doing past year papers, I exposed myself to a variety of topics all at once, and it also allowed me to see how different chapters and topics connect with each other. Here's how I approached it. I'd do a few past years, identify the questions I often got wrong, and then focus on those specific topics. Afterwards, I'd do more past years to make sure I could connect those topics and tackle exam-style questions efficiently. This method actually made me more confident during the test because I knew I could handle a variety of questions. The third tip is something I struggled with a lot in the beginning, which was to be patient and give yourself time to digest everything. There were so many times when I would get frustrated because I couldn't understand a math concept right away. I'd stay up late rereading my textbook and watching more YouTube videos to try and understand the concept, but the next day, I'd still be stuck. But here's the thing. There's no need to rush your progress. We all have our good days. Sometimes the concepts just click, and sometimes they don't, and that's okay. One day, I went to my teacher after class to ask questions on a topic. I think what happened at the time was that I understood parts of the chapter, but there were other parts that I couldn't get the hang of yet. Maybe my teacher saw my anxiousness reflected in the way I was asking questions, and she told me something that stuck with me. Don't worry too much. Not everything will click immediately. Sometimes, you need to give yourself time to go home and digest everything. This is a piece of advice that I want to share with all of you. Math isn't about cramming everything in one night. It's about understanding, bit by bit, and being consistent with your studies. It's also about accepting that some things are going to take time, and that's completely fine. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I used to have really bad exam anxiety. Something that really helped me was that on the morning of the test, when I was having my Milo, or when my dad was fetching me to school, I would find a math subliminal to listen to. This really helped me calm down and made me a little more confident for the test. Here's a trick I learned when I was struggling with factorial questions in my UEC textbook. I was getting really confused because many of the problems had similar working steps in their solutions. My brain started to mix them up. So, I decided to take a piece of paper and I listed the most common question types under this topic. Then, I wrote out the step-by-step solution for each type of question. I also made a list of careless mistakes I often made so that on the morning of the exam, I could look through them and remind myself to avoid them when answering the paper. This may seem simple, but it was incredibly helpful. Here's why it worked. First, it helped me clear up the confusion because I had a visual guide. Second, it made sure that my calculations and workings were neat and organized, something that I'd struggled with before. I used to have teachers comment on my math homework, saying that when they see the way I do problems, they could tell I understand the topic, but they didn't understand why I had to do it that specific way. Another problem I had was that the presentation of my working would be kind of messy. It kind of looked like I just jumbled a bunch of alphabets and numbers together, and some of my workings were not necessary or what the teachers wanted. I realized that a lot of teachers emphasize on clear working because it not only reflects your understanding of the topic, it also makes it easier for the examiners to mark your papers. Ever since I used this tip, I never faced problems with my presentation of calculations and workings. This step-by-step method also made my exam preparation much more efficient. After this, every time I did past years and my homework, I would take note of the most common questions and make my notes like this. Instead of flipping through thick revision books the night before my exam, I only had to look through my notes, which were focused on the most common problem types. This technique works for other subjects too. If you want a video on how this method can be applied to physics and chemistry, let me know in the comments down below. Before I end, I just wanted to share a special message with some of you watching the video right now. I know that it can be very frustrating when you're putting in your best effort and you're still not seeing the results that you want. I just wanted to tell you that I'm proud of you. It takes a lot of determination to keep going forward, to keep pushing yourself, and to keep looking for ways to improve, even when you feel like you're not seeing much progress. Remember that learning is a journey. Every little step forward counts. Keep pushing, be patient, and one day you will see the results that you've been working for.